this idea of powerful knowledge. We are a school that I would call a knowledge-rich school. And this idea of powerful knowledge, knowledge that children can't actually learn at home. Teachers have to teach it to them. So when Alex Quigley talked this morning about the background knowledge, which is absolutely crucial for children to move their learning forward across the curriculum, that's what we're very much dedicated to at St Matthew's. Oracy, vocabulary, storytelling, and evidence-informed professional development. And obviously with all of that, the key thing for us is staff workload. So always looking for ways of trying to make that better. So I'm going to focus on what matters and why in terms of reading for pleasure and progress, and just looking at what we do in terms of evidence-informed practice, linking that to vocabulary. A little bit more about me. You've already heard a little bit. I am the head teacher of St Matthew's. I'm also the research school director. We are a research school and we are a teaching school, and I'm the director for the research school. We are an accredited talk-for writing training centre, so lots of storytelling and story mapping. That kind of starts very early for us in reception. Lots of opportunities for children to retell and talk their own stories from a very early time when they come into school. And remotely, we've carried that on, and we've had some lovely work, some lovely story maps that children have produced. And we can see them reciting those story maps. So we can see that that's embedded, and it's really exciting to see that, the embedding of storytelling and story mapping. I also advise on the UKLA board and the website that Teresa talked about. And I also lead a teacher reading group, so excited to be with the hub today, because I know you've got a teacher reading group too. And I've been leading the teacher reading group since we started. I mean, it's exciting this year because we're working with NQTs, RQTs, ITT students, PGC students. So really catching teachers early to get the reading bug and to move that forward within their own classrooms. I'm also part of the Empathy Lab board, choosing books that will support teachers to teach empathy. And the big launch for Empathy Day, which is usually in June, the big launch is on the 26th of January. So I'm flagging that up. If you don't know about Empathy Day, and if you're not engaged with the books that you can look at and the packs that you can get and all the resources, then please do tune into Empathy Day. There is a website, Empathy Lab, and I'll flash that up a little bit further. I've already talked about my Reading for Pleasure CV. I was, as I said, part of the original Building Communities of Readers project. And that picture at the front of the Building Communities of Readers is my school. And that's my current deputy head with our teachers. So that's always our claim to fame. I always brag about that. I know it's really silly, but I always do brag about the fact that we're on the front cover. So what's my reading history? We always talk about at St Matthew's, our backpacks. And those are the things that we bring with us into school. Often when we bring this invisible backpack into school, children put them down.
Can you unmute yourself? Sonia, we can't hear you, I'm afraid. Thanks. There we go. Thank you.
When did I stop? When did you stop hearing me?
You were talking about the Empathy Day, okay, and the backpacks.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
So yes, so I talked about my invisible backpack, and but I came to school. I went to school, and nobody ever asked me to open it, or nobody ever looked inside. But if you had looked inside, you would have found out that I was actually a reader. I've got 10 brothers and sisters. And the one thing that was consistent with us is that on Saturdays, my mum and dad used to send us to the library. And if you know Birmingham, we've got a library in Moseley called Moseley Road Library, and swimming baths is right next door. So we used to go swimming and we used to go to the library. And it was such an amazing thing to go and take out those books. I'm overwhelmed already by the thought of it. And you used to get those free 8 books, and used to be able to take them home, and it was amazing. And then actually, when I turned 18, I actually went to work at that library. Which was absolutely, I mean, it blew my mind that I actually worked in this library. And I remember on a Wednesday when they used to close the library, and you didn't want to work on a Saturday, so you worked in the library when it was closed. And instead of doing all the repairs and the sorting of the bookshelves, I used to just spend my time reading. So it was terrible, a terrible boss. It stood me in good stead. You'd have also found out that actually my family were very much engaged with the Bible, from a very strong Pentecostal family. So I knew Bible stories inside out. And actually, if anybody had asked me to recite any story in the Bible, I would have been able to do that, because that's part of my reading history. And I remember going to secondary school, and I remember you used to have to write those essays about, retell the story of the prodigal son. I knew I'd smash that. I'd always get 20 out of 20, because I knew that was part of my reading history. We also used to have airmail letters come from Jamaica, where my parents were from, and we used to fight to read them out. Because it was so exciting when my grandma or granddad used to tell us the stories from Jamaica. And I always remember how they started: greeting in the precious name of Jesus, our soon coming King, how keeping hope fine. And every letter used to start like that. And it used to be exciting to be the one to read that out aloud. And then I remember the first book that really had an impact on me, and that was Stig of the Dump. That is the book that totally blew my mind. And when the teacher read it, I was like, I can see it. I can see it. It's amazing. So it really was a pleasure to listen to that. So that's my reading history. I wonder if you can take a moment and maybe just pop it in the chat. Anything that you remember from your reading history, anything that jumps out, any book, any magazine, any childhood book. Were you a reader when you were a child? If we opened your reading backpack, what would we have found inside? Some people don't have a reading history, and actually they became readers when they grew up, but what would we have found in yours? And I always think this is a great way to start with the children. Find out what their reading histories are. George's Marvellous Medicine, I love that. He said Jackanory. Yes, Jackanory, definitely. Sweet Valley High. Beano and Dandy. Your dad reading to you. Actually, I remember my dad reading the newspaper to me as if he knew everything in the newspaper and said everything with such authority. Tom's Midnight Garden, some lovely ones there, some really lovely ones, brilliant. One of the books that I'm probably one of my favourite books, and it's an older book, it's called The Whisperer, Nick Butterworth's book. And if I had my slides, you'd see the front cover of 2 cats, one peering up at each other and one peering down at each other. And it's the cat version of Romeo and Juliet. And it's about these 2 cat gangs that are engaged in a war. But in between that war, and a mouse is a narrator. He's such a sly little mouse. In fact, he's a rat. There's a sly little rat, and he's the narrator. And he loves all the conflict so that he doesn't have to get involved. They don't get involved with him whilst they're fighting each other. But in between that, the 2 cats from the different cat gangs fall in love. And if you've not read that book, I won't have a chance to read it today, but if you've not read that book, The Whisperer, Nick Butterworth, is absolutely beautiful. One of my favourite books. Somebody saying The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, that Dad used to read it to them every day. Beautiful. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my school context. We're an inner city school. I would say inner. And we serve, if we were looking at on the deprivation indicator, we'd be in the fifth quartile, the most deprived. We're about 80% pupil premium. And lots of our families suffer from issues around income deprivation. Housing is the massive one. We're surrounded by flats here. But I always say that it's a privilege to serve here. I don't see it as a deficit. I don't see it as a problem. In fact, it spurs me on to do more. And one of the things, as I said at the beginning, that it spurs me on to do is to ensure that just because our children were born in this area, they should not have the opportunities that other children have. So it spurs us on to do that. Because of that, we've achieved a lot for us. And I know that when I read these things out, you'll say, oh, that doesn't mean anything. Being Ofsted Outstanding, who cares these days? It doesn't mean anything to anybody. But for us, it's just a recognition of some of the work that we've been doing. So as I said, we are a national teaching school. We are an RE hub. We work with NatTre and we're the primary hub for Birmingham. And then, as I said, our talk for writing and our research schools mean that we have the privilege and the opportunity to work with a lot of schools. So, of course, I'm going to start off with the EEF. And I happened to catch Alex Quigley's session this morning and a couple of things that he said I'm just going to go over. What the EEF offers for schools is what are the best bets. There's no research that is 100% proof. But what the EEF pulled together in their guidance documents is to say to schools, if nothing else, do these things, because this will be better than the other things that haven't got any research behind them. So things like the Scarborough Reading Rope and really looking at language comprehension and word recognition, there's a clear evidence base behind that. There's a clear basis behind that process. So schools tuning into that is really important, and it's your best bet if you want to teach and move reading forward. This idea that there's some key strategies that we need to teach, and Alex talked about reciprocal reading. In the new updated Key Stage 1 guidance document, they've pulled out some of these strategies and really exemplified them for teachers with some ideas in terms of questions that teachers can ask. But one of the key messages, one of the key bits of research says that there is no right way to teach reading. We have to do phonics, we have to teach comprehension, that's clear. But the other thing that it says is there's limited evidence to show that only one way works. So for me, that means that we've got to have a balance. We've got to have a balanced reading curriculum. And if we're only teaching children how to read, but not teaching children how to enjoy and have agency as readers, then that is no balance. So the key idea for our school is that we've got to have the balance, a little bit of everything, a bit of shared, a bit of guided, a bit of independent, a bit of one-to-one, reading aloud, but definitely reading for pleasure, definitely reading for pleasure. And I always say that for us, we use our practical knowledge of our children, our local understanding of what they need, we use the data and the evidence, and we put that together to move forward evidence-informed school improvement. And if the evidence says that reading for pleasure works, why wouldn't I, as a head teacher, be moving that forward? It wouldn't make sense to me that I wouldn't be using the data, that the body of data that's behind this idea of reading for pleasure. So as Teresa said, we were the first winners. Can I just say that again? We were the first winners of the Egmont UKLA Reading for Pleasure Awards. And again, that was really a recognition for us of the work that we'd been doing for a long time to ensure that teaching children how to read and reading for pleasure had the same level of parity within our school. Any teacher that comes here, whether they like reading for pleasure or not, I always say to them, if you don't like it, pretend you do. It's that important. It's a social justice issue. So if it's that important, even if you don't love it yourselves, then you better get to love it, I always say. And you will. Then pretend you do for now. So on my school improvement plan, every single year, so that my governors have to commit to reading for pleasure, I always put 4 bullet points on my school improvement plan. One is to ensure that every child learns within the context of a whole school reading environment, and there's pathways and challenges for our readers. The other is to ensure that every child is read to regularly and read to and listened to read and builds their agencies built. The other thing is about there being a wide range of books, and I always put that one in because when I spend money on books, my governors can't say anything because I always say, well, it is in the school improvement plan. And then the other one is be able to have informal and formal opportunities to discuss reading and to help our children to become courageous and discriminating readers. That is our kind of motto. So That is there every year in my school improvement plan. And as I said, because it's there, my governors have to hold me accountable for moving reading for pleasure forward within my school. And that is important. Somebody's going to challenge me on it if I haven't moved it forward. So it's really important that I put it in there for both for myself and for them to know that that is the key thing for St. Matthew's School, alongside teaching children how to read. Teresa talked about what is reading for pleasure. And one of the things that we had to clarify at St. Matthew's is what it is, that reader volition, that agency, because a lot of teachers do come in and think it's about dissecting books. That is teaching children how to read. Reading for pleasure is not about dissecting books. It's not about pulling books apart. There's a place for that within our curriculum, and we do it as much as anybody else. But we also make sure that there's opportunities and space to read and relax and to engage and to build agency and confidence, and that it's solitary and that it's social and that it's interactive, and hopefully it's transformational for the children. So this tension between reading instruction and reading for pleasure, the will and the skill, as Teresa calls it, the will and the skill, we've let that go. There's no tension here. The research is clear. The evidence bank is clear. It increases literacy and numeracy. So the children who read for pleasure do well across the curriculum anyway. It increases vocabulary. That's what we're all working towards. That's what Alex Quigley was talking about this morning. Reading for pleasure helps that. It helps children's self-confidence, their identity, their imagination, their empathy, their mindfulness. These things are so concrete that it doesn't make sense, as I said, that we wouldn't be pushing it forward as part of our evidence-informed school improvement practice. So it's key for me. So it talks about empathy, and as I said, I'm very much part of the empathy lab movement and the Empathy Day movement. And on the 26th of January, there's going to be a big launch on Twitter linked to do that. And one of the things it talks about is the fact that you can teach empathy. Empathy is something that the brain responds to, and the research is there that backs that up. So it's about reading, connecting, and doing. And I love empathy, because empathy is not the same as sympathy. When we sympathize with someone, often we say they're there, but we never do anything about it. Well, empathy is about action, doing something about it. And it's great to have readers and children in school who are convicted to do something. They've read about something in history or in geography, and they've read about it in their other lessons in PHSC, and they say, actually, can we raise some money? Can we go out and do this? Can we go out and give some food to this? Can we collect some food? And it's great to have a school where that is part of the practice, and that comes through reading books, talking about empathy, and building the children's understanding of putting into action both in school, at home, and in their community. And that's really important. So one of the things that's really helped us is the Reading for Pleasure website. And I'm not even going to talk it through, because I know Teresa's done that. She's talked about it a lot. So I'm just flagging it up again as being a key tool, both for teachers and for leaders, if you really want to move Reading for Pleasure forward. I want to just go back, go a little bit into this idea that teaching reading, the skill of reading and reading for pleasure, can cross over. And I want to just delve a little bit into what the phonics work that we do. One of the EF document, the guidance document that talks about improving literacy at Key Stage 1, recommendation 3 talks about this idea of systematic phonics and preparing children for literacy through the recommendations there. And our reading timetable for Key Stage 1 includes all of those things that I talked about at the beginning when I talked about a balanced reading curriculum. So we do shared reading, we do daily phonics, we do guided reading, but there's also that daily read aloud, and there's opportunities for children to read independently within our reading spaces. We do comprehension, and we've mapped that out. So teachers know when to teach and how to teach. We've done all the reading and the training around that. But what we're trying to increase for our children is our opportunities to read silently, to read aloud, and to be read to. Doug Lamar, in his book, Reading Reconsidered, talks about the reading road miles And my mission in my school is to increase the reading road miles. So when you look at our timetable, you will see that the balance of reading is probably tipped. It's probably, in fact, our curriculum is probably tipped towards reading a little bit more, because for me, I'm passionate about this social justice idea of reading, and that reading underpinning every other curriculum area. And actually, if you can't read, you can't access the curriculum. So it's a massive thing for us, both in terms of teaching it and also getting children to engage in it and their agency. I'm going to take you back to the national curriculum then, what it says about background knowledge. It talks very much about the fact that without that background knowledge, we often think that children who struggle with comprehension, it's because they don't know inference. Inference can't be taught. The research is clear around that. Actually, the more children know, the more they can answer questions. So one of the things, as I said, that we try to do is to build that background knowledge across every opportunity that we have. So this idea of using our phonics sessions to help children to acquire vocabulary as well, in a very strategic way, to read additional books, to practice their phonics as well. We try and tap into that as much as possible. We also use our story maps to do that. So in reception and in year 1, rewriting books like Humpty Dumpty, like a basic version of Humpty Dumpty, and up leveling it a little bit with some more challenging vocabulary, although Teresa has talked about owl babies today and the fabulous vocabulary in that, just ensuring that we're not losing those opportunities to really develop children's vocabulary. So for us, the phonics lessons link explicitly to our reading. There's an emphasis on vocabulary as well, and decoding is never separated from meaning. So meaning is clear and it's worthwhile and it relates to that wider curriculum. And just imagine I'm showing you our timetables now, and you can see the amount of reading that we do. The other thing that we do is make sure, as I said, that phonics and vocabulary go together. So we look at books like I Dare You, and dare, we'd use that word within the teaching of our phonics, as well as when we're reading I Dare You for pleasure. So if we're reading that book for pleasure, in our phonics sessions, we can remind the children about the sounds within the word. So making sure that some of those books that we read for pleasure, we're not dissecting them during the reading for pleasure time, but we're reminding the children about them during our phonics time. The Hare and the Tortoise is one of our favourite books in reception, and this idea of the hare, children don't know, in Nietzsche's at least, don't know what a hare is. They obviously think it's something else, but we can use that book, and lots of Aesop's fables are fantastic for reading in reception and in year 1 and in year 2, because there's so much in there for children. But also then when we do our phonics sessions, hare, we can use the sounds within that to teach it as well. One of our other books in reception, we do Somalia. We've got a large population of Somalian pupils. So one of our geography units is Somalia. We look at Mogadishu. And the book that we kind of link to that is Sinbad the Sailor, Marcia Williams' version. So we read that as our reading for pleasure book. And in there, it's got the idea of Sinbad and the mare, a horse. So when we're doing reading for pleasure and we're doing the sounds, we can use hare, mare, share, all of those sounds are coming up within our phonics. So again, just making the link between our reading for pleasure time and our phonics time, not dissecting books in our reading for pleasure time, but just reminding the children about the books that we've read in our phonics sessions. Making sure that we're bringing it in as well to our Talk for Writing sessions. So one of the books we read in Talk for Writing is Augustus and His Smile. And again, lots of opportunities for brilliant vocabulary work in there. Grey rain raced, waved, paraded. Lots of lovely vocabulary in Augustus and His Smile. And as well as poetry, lots of opportunities for reading poetry in reception, talking about poetry in reception, talking about emotions linked to poetry. We use Mandico's poem, Lost It, Found It. Looked into my pocket, I looked beneath a golden rock, I looked into an elephant's eye, I looked in a flower pot, I looked on the top of a double-decker bus, I looked in a second-hand shop. So lots of opportunities there, and we bring that into our Kit Right unit as well inside in my magic box. So lots of opportunities to share good poetry, good fiction books and good non-fiction books as part of our reading for pleasure, and then bringing it into phonics. The other thing that we do is definitely building the will to read. So I've already talked about our reading for pleasure opportunities. Reading aloud a lot. Every opportunity we can take in Key Stage 1 in reception to just stop, drop and read a book aloud. During this time remotely, we're recording books every day. The children have a story read aloud to them. We're getting children to map out parts of stories that they've got at home, and then we are getting them to record themselves and send them in. So definitely keeping that reciprocal reading community going within our school. When I do my assemblies, I'm always sharing a book, sharing a poem, flagging up the importance of reading to parents all the time. So parents know, and any emails or messages, I'm sharing what I'm reading. So parents know that it's really important. Teresa talks about books as windows, books as mirrors, and books as sliding doors. Rudine Sims Bishop's quotes, really important. And really important that it reflects the realities. One of the books that I've shared recently with our parents is one called My Hair. And it's a beautiful book by Hannah Lee. I think Teresa shared it as well. One of the pages says, Auntie's hair is shaved real short, much like the head of a lioness. She is cool, stylish and carefree. That's how she likes it best. And I always say to the children that auntie is me. The children always laugh. So I love that book, and that really reflects the reality. I think that's a great example of how books really do reflect realities, and the more we can show children that, and even if we haven't got a diverse community, the world is diverse, so children need to know that is the world that they live in. So really important. One of the activities that I do with my teachers is the ABC of books, and I ask them to write down as many authors as they can, and how many diverse authors, characters, publishers do they know. And it's amazing how sometimes limited it is, and how much we have to work to widen that out for our teachers. So really take it as your mission. If you're a leader, part of what you have to do is to support your teachers to become reading teachers. So what do we do in our school? Familiar reading boxes, that's what Teresa talks about. When a book's read aloud, we put it into the familiar reading box, so when the children have their time to spend in the reading space, and again, can I flag up, there's no point having a fancy reading space if nobody goes in there. It's got to be used and modeled to the children how to use it. And what we've asked our children to do is to create a little reading space at home. So we've had pictures, our children sending in pictures of their little tiny reading spaces at home with their books that we've given away, and I'll talk about that. And the children have sent in their pictures. So get children to create reading spaces at home. Ask parents to make it a bit of a family thing. And because we know that we've sent books home, we know that our children can do that. Magazines, Teresa's already talked about that, knowledge of magazines. We know the power of magazines. We had an underground group of children writing their own magazines, and it was only when a child sidled up to me and said, Miss, do you want to buy a magazine? And I was like, what are you talking about? Get over here. And he actually showed the magazine to me, and it was beautiful. The artwork was amazing. And the children said that was they were inspired by the Beano. And if we hadn't found out what the children wanted to read, we would never have got that. And so we have got a school magazine, and our selection of magazines, we invest in that. It's on our school improvement plan to buy more books, to buy magazines. So if it's important, we've got to invest in it. The other thing that we do is reading for leisure time, putting it on the curriculum. When I first started at St Matthew's, I had to parole the corridors and ensure it was happening. When we set up our remote learning timetable, that was on there. We would have not set up a remote learning timetable that didn't include reading for pleasure. Making it sociable, multiple copies of books have really been a game changer in our school. And that's come from Nikki Gamble, Just Imagine. 3 copies of books so that children can talk together around a book. And it's not always solitary. It can be independent, but if you want to talk to somebody else about a book, then 3 copies. So one of our most popular in reception in Year 1 has been You Choose, Nick Sharratt and Pippa Goodhart's You Choose Fairy Tales. We've given it a purpose. Our children review for the Children's Book Awards, and that includes reception. So they also review books. So we're part of the Children's Book Awards. We were able to go 2 years ago to the Children's Book Awards, and we sat with Corgi Paul, who writes The Worst Witch, and he did lots of pictures for us, and I was fangirling all over the place. It was terrible, but it was great. So doing things like that, what's happening in your area? What can you get involved in your community that can move reading forward? And then the other thing is give books away. If books are old or are getting a little bit worn, give them away, give them back to your parents. At the end of the last lockdown, we did a massive St. Matthew's book giveaway, and we invited parents in one by one, family by family, to collect 3 bags of books each. And they all went away with a bag of books. And we know that the research is clear. There's a growing body of knowledge that says houses that are full of books boost children's literacy and numeracy. That's what the research says. So it's really important that if we've got books and we can source books that we can get to families, get into the homes, then we make every effort to do it. It really works. Reading events, we're very much about our reading events. At the end of every summer, we always have a massive book bash, we call it, our Great St. Matthew's Book Bash / picnic. And if you'd see my slides, you would see our parents sitting on the grass, sharing a book with their child. And one of the things we do, we're a Church of England school, we approached our local church and we asked, in fact, we approached our main church in Birmingham City Centre, St. Martin's, and we asked the priest to ask every congregation member to donate a book. And so we were able to get over 250 books donated to us that way. And again, once we got them, we were able to give them out. And it links with the EF document that talks about in preparing for literacy, supporting parents to help children to help them, supporting parents to understand how pupils learn. The pupil learn through reading aloud. 10 minutes of being read to a day is 1 year's worth of progress. So parents understand that, and we bang on about that to our parents every day. Every other message that I send home to parents is about reading aloud at home. So if parents know that, then they know it's important. The other thing we do at St. Matthew's is author visits. And again, the research is clear. The National Literacy Trust says twice as many children and young people who have an author visit read above the expected age level. So the more authors you can get into school, and when I say get into school, do it virtually now. Do it virtually, and there's lots of authors who are willing to be beamed into your onto your remote platforms. Last year, I think it was last year, we had Carl Nova and Jennifer Killick, and they were absolutely fantastic for just getting children engaged and happy. So again, really important. And then, as I said, investing in good books and investing in good books across the curriculum. Across our school, our subject leaders have little spaces where they show off their curriculum books, so children can see that there's reading not just in English, but reading in every area of the curriculum. I'm very much an advocate of the head teacher being the leader of reading. There's no point telling your teachers to read if you don't read. So if you come into my office, you'll see my office is a cornucopia of books. In fact, there's too many books in there and not enough space to work. And also my deputy head and my assistant head, they've also got book displays in their rooms so that when children come in, they can see that they're a reader, not only in their own subject areas, but also for pleasure. Teresa talks about the activity where you ask the children, what do they think of you as a reader? And I did this earlier when children came back in the autumn term, and the children said I did a little picture and they had to write down what they thought of me. They said that I read aloud in assembly, I like to talk about reading a lot, and one of them put 3 exclamation marks. I've worked in a library. I read all types of books. I love to buy books. I read everything. I love Bible stories and I read newspapers. So I was quite proud of that. My children know that I'm a reading head teacher. And it's about that, Teresa calls it, are you a reading teacher? Capital R, capital T. Not just a reading teacher, but is it a capital R and a capital T? A real reading teacher. And then what do your walls in your school say about your school as a reading school? If I walked into your school, would I feel the atmosphere of reading? Is it confined to certain teachers' classrooms? And I always say the problem with having just one teacher or a couple of teachers engaged and buying their own books is that if that teacher ever leaves, heaven forbid, they take all of those with them. So you've got to invest as a school, so you've got your own book capital and it doesn't belong to somebody else. So it's really important. So coming to the end, Alex Quigley spoke this morning about implementation. And if you're going to implement and build a reading culture, you've got to think about what that means for your school. Often it will mean making space for it. Alex talked about dropping other things. How much teaching of reading, teaching children how to read, are you doing as opposed to getting them to enjoy reading for pleasure? If both of them work in tandem and children are only ever dissecting text, doing SATs papers all the time, and they're never just reading, relaxing, enjoying books, then do we need to drop something in order to build on something that works? Success is going to be messy. There's some teachers who don't buy into it, but just keep banging, keep pushing, keep working, and you can get it done. We turned our reading culture around. It took years. It's a marathon and not a sprint. We had the DFE come and visit us as part of Teresa recommending, and where Teresa said they are really engaged in reading for pleasure, it is true, and they want to see what schools are doing to engage pupils, not only in teaching children how to read, but also ensuring that children read for pleasure. So it's a really important journey for schools to go on. So if you want to find out a little bit more about what we do, I've got a little bit of writing about our reading journey in a book called The Curriculum, edited by Claire Seeley, and Alex Quigley was on this morning. St Matthews has got a case study in there. So I'm going to leave you with a quote that says, and from Kate DeCamillo, that says, reading should be presented to children not as a chore or as a duty, it should be offered to them as a precious gift. Thank you.
Sonia, thank you so much. That was incredibly powerful and an absolute call to arms. We really want to embrace the moral mission that you've left us with this afternoon. So thank you so much. So much to pick up from there. And your children are incredibly astute. They've got you nailed, haven't they? They know you very, very well indeed. So thank you so much. A real moral mission, a real sense of social justice that we're all empowered now to go away and develop our own schools, and some really handy tweaks that we can then take away of creating our reading spaces that are meaningful for our children and making those meaningful connections within our own school, and that can really inspire our children to love reading as much as Sonia does. Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to hear you.
I'm sorry about the PowerPoint. I hope it kind of came across anyway.
It absolutely did. So thank you so much. And in the spirit of giving away of books, as you know, lovely Janine has purchased books. So our lucky winner today is Vicky Barnard. So if you can pop your name and address in the chat, Vicky, there is a wonderful book surprise coming to you, gifted by the English Hubs. And we hope you very much enjoy the reading journey. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.